So today we're going to be doing a 3G stick welding simulation, and all we're going to be doing here is using an outside corner joint with a gap and land to simulate a groove welding vertically up. On a regular groove weld, okay, we have beveled plate and we have a gap in between them to get a root pass and then a cap pass on the other side. And so for this, we have that beveled plate. We typically will flatten that bevel and put a land on it. And that's just that thickness at the end of the bevel. And then we'll put a gap. And depending on the thickness of our land and our gap, will determine our amperage and technique. So here I'm prepping some plate, just cleaning it up a little bit. And then I'm going to put a land. Really critical on how precise my land is. A lot of times people will use a 3/32 land, but if they're not careful, it will be a lot smaller or a lot thicker, and that will give you a lot of problems. So you got to make sure that your gap and land is set properly. I'm going to tack this up in a little jig I have here. This jig is a 332 spacer in the middle. I'm going to take it out once I get one side tacked, and then I'm going to look down my gap and make sure it's the same size. I'm going to kind of tap it, kind of push it in so that I get a perfect gap the whole way. It's really important. And I'm going to go ahead and tack the other side. And so I'm going to show you some different techniques. This first technique works really good if you like a tighter gap and maybe a smaller landing. And it's just the drag method. Okay, we're going to be at about 85 amps. We're just going to stick the rod into the root of the joint and kind of drag it up. We have to keep a really tight arc, and pretty much as long as you keep a little bit of pressure and your amperage is set correctly, you literally just drag this as it moves and kind of burns into the root of the joint. The light kind of plays with this arc shot a little bit, but I'm really just trying to stick that rod in there, slight pressure on the rod, and that's about it. Okay, this is me coming up to the end of my tack. I go all the way through the tack to get complete penetration through the joint. You can see that here. And we can think of this similar as pushing a straw through a cup, okay, similar to that. The second method, all of you have probably heard of this, is the whip and pause method. Now this works really well with a thicker land and a thicker gap, so typically an 1/8 inch land and an 1/8 inch gap. We're going to be lower on our amperage, so maybe 80 to 75 amps. And we typically get a little bit more root reinforcement. I'm going to whip up, keep a tight arc, and then go back down. Okay, and this is the whip and pause method. It's a little slower, but we get more root reinforcement. The third is kind of a combination of both. Okay, this is the reverse Christmas tree method. And it's kind of like we're dragging it up, but we're also going side to side in a downward fashion. I'm also going to do a restart here, so I start about a 1/2 inch below. You can see I'm still not even consumed into the keyhole yet. And this gives me proper fusion on my root. Okay, and you can see how I go side to side in a downward fashion. This really ensures proper fusion on both sidewalls. I learned this technique from Hamar Aguilo on WeldTube. It works extremely well for me, but you do what you want. Any of these methods that you use, you have to use a tight arc, okay? We can't long arc this. We gotta push some metal through the back of the plate. And if you're sticking a lot, you're using too much amperage. If you're blowing a hole through it, you're using too little amperage. And your gap and land also has an effect on this as well. So for the next pass, okay, we're using an 1/8 inch 7018 at about 115 amps, and I'm going quick, okay, side to side just a little bit. I kind of got some caffeine shakes. We're just doing a straight stringer here, in a sense. You can use a 3/32 electrode if you're worried about blowing through your root pass, and you'd run that at probably about 85 amps. The first pass, if you're using a larger rod, might not look the greatest. We might have a little bit of underfill or undercut, but as long as we fill that in with the next pass, we're fine. We're going to weave this pass with a Z-weave. Okay, 1/8 inch rod, about 115 to 110 amps, side to side like this. Now we're pausing a little on the sides, but we don't want to get carried away. We're not going to fill out the joint with this pass, believe it or not. With the outside corner joint, how it works, we just need to have another pass for our cap pass. Otherwise, it just isn't going to look very good. So we got some undercut on the sides, but again, we'll fill it in and we will be just fine. This is a restart here. I start about a 1/2 inch in front and drag down to where I left off. And again, now you can see how we're really going to get a good fill pass, or actually a cap pass. I'm pausing on the edges. I'll knock down my amperage to about 110, just so that I don't get any undercut on the sides. I'm pausing on the sides and moving quickly side to side, and that's what we kind of want it to look like. You can see my restart at the bottom there, and if you do it right, you shouldn't be able to notice it too much. This is my rod angle. This is kind of what it looks like while I'm welding. I weld one-handed because I get more of a range of motion. It just takes some practice. Okay, you can also see I use a positive angle on my electrode holder, so I use like a 45-degree angle up, and that allows me to get a proper angle and also be able to burn a whole stick electrode in one pass. Please give me a like and comment below what you want to see next. Thank you.